All right, so the purpose of this session is to review the matching standards and its application to cataloging in the system. So I thought I would bring up the matching standards document. It's on the SageLib website under cataloging. Standards for matching database records. And this was modified. This is a document that we created in 2015. And it was a way to loosen things up a bit for the benefit of our patrons and resource sharing. And so I'll do a quick overview of the document and then go over an example that Tracy sent to me. And then we can go to questions or maybe other situations that you've encountered that you'd like to go over. So the first thing in the document is in regard to the ISBN, indicating that it's a good way to search to find a match in the database, but it's only a starting point. And if you don't find it by ISBN, it's always good to search by title and author, which is the next one. Same as before, the title must match exactly up to the first 5 words. Check the subtitle. So that's pretty straightforward. Where we've started to change things is talking about, well, the publisher and pagination must match. But there are situations where the publisher may be different, but they are related publishers. And maybe it's a house, a publishing house that's underneath a main one. But anyway, there's lots of publisher affiliations out there. And the example given here is Penguin and Puffin. Go ahead. Okay. And so that's something to look at. The page numbers should match, but occasionally there's a clerical error, and I found this in some recent records where the pagination is just one off, and I've researched it and found that it was just a typo. So what we've stated in this document is that if it varies more than a few, you probably don't have a match. So it's something to look at in considering whether the record matches your book or not. Binding, there's rebound titles that the content has not been changed, just the binding, and in which case we would add those ISBNs to the list. The pagination's the same, that kind of thing. All right, size. If the size is within 3 centimeters, it can still be considered a match. And this is quite a bit different than we originally had, where book club editions weren't put on a first print edition. They were considered separate bibliographic records. And so this is a newer change, and there's a lot of records in the system. If we went back through and did cleanup, that we would be combining the book club edition and the regular edition. Varying editions are also a match if the content, the pagination, and the publisher are the same. And the statement to add a 500 note if you're attaching an item with no edition statement or a varying edition statement. Okay, so we can refer back to this if we have questions. I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview initially. Okay, so the example that I have is a new book. Or it's a reprint of an older book. Let's get back to that. I'm going to do a title search. And the book is Walter Was Worried. Okay, so we've got a book in the system already, and there was only one in the system, so it came up right away. So it's a first edition. It was published in 2005. The new one that Tracy gave me an example of is a book that was published in, I think, 2017. I brought it up on WorldCat since I don't have the book in hand for us a way to look at it. So we've got the new one that she was trying to figure out whether she should attach to this other one is also Roaring Brook Press. So it's the same publisher, but it's giving 2016 as the publication year. So, and if you come down here, it just says 1 volume unpaged, color illustrations, 23 centimeters. I'm going to go ahead and bring up let's see, bring up the record. And we can see that it also has 1 volume unpaged, color illustrations, 23 centimeters. So in my view, this would be a situation where we could attach the new book to this existing record. But if we do attach it, what we need to do is we need to add the additional ISBNs to the record. So I'll go ahead and do that now. And I'll hop back over to grab the ISBNs. Okay, so we've added the 2016 ISBNs to this record. Because there was an edition statement in this one, it says first edition, and there was also a statement in the 2016 one. Oh, where was it? New edition. And when it says new edition, you have to kind of look around to see, okay, is there any evidence that the content might have changed? And in reviewing this, I could not find anything that indicated that the content would be different. Some things that would give you a clue would maybe be a different illustrator. And in this case, there's no illustrator listed. So that's why I felt like it was a good thing to combine, because my guess is that the patron is not going to care whether they get the 2005 edition or the 2016 edition if the content is the same. Any questions or concerns about that?
So Beth, you would not change anything about the addition though. You just add the ISBN numbers.
Well, I was going to get to that next.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, no, that's a good question, Tracy, and I'm glad you asked it. Because that is um, typically what I have done is I have removed the addition statement, and then in a 500, I say additions may vary.
And Beth, I typically have left the addition statement and then
Okay.
just added that statement. So
that is a good discussion point. The reason, I don't know that I've done it in all cases, but the addition statement has been such a key point in previous times of distinguishing one record from another. And I guess I had some concerns as to whether it might be confusing to retain it, and if others would be dissuaded from attaching their items to it because of that concern. Any other feedback? The other thing I thought we could do to this record, because there's only 2 dates involved, and the first one was 2005, is looking at the possibility of doing 2016, comma, 2005. I know, Dia, in the past you've said you haven't altered the date, and so this isn't a requirement. I just wondered if it would apply to this particular one and maybe not all of them.
this is Dia, and generally what I have done is I will put a subfield Q next to the ISBN and identify it that way.
Okay. So you qualify the date in the ISBN rather than doing it here?
Right.
Okay.
I just think it looks cleaner that way.
It does, and it leaves the record more intact. And so that's probably a better way to do it. It's good to have sessions like this so we hear what others are doing. Okay, got to pick the right one though. The main thing is we're trying to make the catalog more usable by our patrons. And this was one of the ways that we felt we could do that. So something like that, Dia?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
Don't forget the subfield D and 040 because you have done a modification.
You are right. You are right. And a reminder out to folks that you don't have to do this 040 subfield D unless you make a significant change, which we are in this case. We're adding some ISBNs and also the 500 statement. So I'm putting the OCLC code for Sage in here since I'm doing it as Sage. All right, click on Save. I also like to double check and make sure the 999's in there and see if anything else needs to be added at the same time. We could go back and add some more subjects, but I guess it's not really the subject of this particular session. So I can do that later if I find some. I'll open up a new tab, click on search. Are there any other examples or things that you'd like to go over related to this? My guess is you're encountering this on a daily basis, and so I'd like to maybe know of challenges that you're facing in knowing whether you should attach or not attach. It's very quiet out there.
Can you hear me? This is Ellen.
Yeah, I can hear you, Ellen.
I have a question, but I'm not sure you wanted to get into it now. It's on the ISBN lines. When we add the Qs, are we supposed to, what term are we supposed to use? Is it hardback, hardcover? You mentioned earlier using turtle.
Yeah,
I'm just not sure what the terms are.
Yeah,
the official terms.
You know, there really aren't any official terms, basically the subfield Q is what's called a qualifier for the O2O, and it just gives it space for additional information about that particular ISBN. So it doesn't have a controlled vocabulary, which means it really can be anything. Then it needs to be hardcover and hardback would both be fine. It's not something that we're narrowing down our searches for by. So I guess I wouldn't stress about using a set vocabulary. You're going to start seeing, things on a regular basis. Like you've seen the paperback in there quite a bit, and I see hardcover. But there's also things like if somebody catalogs a set of materials, they'll put in the subfield Q the volume number of that particular ISBN. So it'll be volume 1, volume 2, that kind of thing. So it's used for a lot of different things. And I think that's why the vocabulary is open-ended.
Okay. Thanks.
Oh, sure. So is there a particular author that you think that has a lot of these potential match issues? Okay, so Anna sent an example in the chat, so rather than digging into that, Okay, yeah, I'll bring it up, Anna, but if the pagination is significantly different, I would still create a different record because somebody else might get that wildly different one at another time. But it is a good question. Another reminder to folks, when you're searching, make sure that your search library is the Sage library system, because that's another way we get duplicates too. Okay, so let me search for this one. Okay, and yes, there's only one. And so I don't know. Okay, and Catherine's saying Curious George. Okay, so we'll look at those in a minute. So yeah, if the pagination is wildly different, more than a few, and you know it's not a typo, sometimes what I do is I'll search for the same title on WorldCat and see, okay, how many different editions are out there, or did somebody just really get wild on the keyboard when they were typing in their pages? And oftentimes I do find different versions of it. Another place I look is on Amazon, just because it's a big database, and sometimes I'll find self-published works on Amazon when I won't find them on WorldCat. And it just gives me another area of reference to see what the books are. Okay, and Anna checked out the author's site, and she did do multiple versions and printings of the items, so that was good to know. I had forgotten. I also checked too on the author. So let's go ahead and do a quick search on Curious George. I had mentioned that because we made this change in 2015, obviously records that had existed prior to that, we didn't go back and clean all those up to combine things that would now be combined under our new matching standards. Sometimes we do that as a part of a cleanup when we're working on a particular author, and other times it just stays that way because we've got a lot of irons in the fire. Okay, so Curious George. Sometimes what I'll do when I'm looking at a group of things and I want to find all of the titles together, I'll come over here, and rather than sorting by relevance, I'll sort by title A to Z, so that I can get all of the groupings together. And I could further narrow it down to books if I just wanted to look at books. So what I'm doing is looking at, okay, we've got the Complete Adventures of Curious George. We've got 2 that are Mifflin, but and they both have the same number of pages. This one has some sound discs with it, so because that's a different type of edition, with the inclusion of the sound discs, I wouldn't look at that as a candidate for combining, but we can look down here and see what else there is. Here's another one that's got sound discs with it. Okay, here's one that's in 1995. And the other one that we were looking at up here was 2001. But a different number of pages. This one is 422. So even though they're the same publisher, the pages are far enough off that we would not want to combine those. And so those wouldn't be candidates.
This is Dia. If anyone's wondering when we say off by a few, kind of a rule that we've stuck to for several years and has been thrown around many times, is about 10. So if that helps people.
Yeah, I don't think we set a specific number of pages like we did with the centimeters, just because we wanted, we wanted to err on the side of caution, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay. There are a lot of Curious Georges out there.
And as you're looking too, I might remind folks that if you do come across what you think is a duplicate, feel free to send those to Beth or one of the mentors, and we'll look into getting those merged or deduplicated.
Thanks, Tia. I should have put that down in my notes because I wanted to express that, that we are a resource if you come across something. Now that we're just on this Curious George video recording, at this point we're not combining full screen and widescreen records for DVDs. At this point, we're keeping them separate, so that's one distinction. I know it's a different edition, but with movies, it seemed to be more important to keep those records separate for the patron if there was a strong preference for one or the other. And it looks like we have lots of pages of Curious George. I don't know whether we're going to find example right off, but okay. Curious George, friends, favorite stories, yeah. Okay, dinosaurs. Okay, so here we have Curious George and the Dinosaur. They're both in the same year, but they are different publishers. Scholastic versus, is it Houghton or Houghton? Probably Houghton. And the Dump Truck, another Scholastic versus, yeah. Isn't it strange how you can't find examples when you want to, but when you're not searching for examples, you find plenty. Okay, so here's one. So we've got Curious George and the Puppies. Same publisher, same year. They're both hardcover, but one says Lap Edition. They have the same number of pages. But the centimeters are different.
And the pages look like they may be paginated in one and not in the other.
Correct. So in this case, the Dow's has it as a board book. So that would make me want to check out the record to see if it says on board pages somewhere. Okay, let me narrow this down. It does have a 500 board book. So because it's board pages versus regular pages, my opinion would be that they need to continue to be separate. How do the rest of you feel?
That's what we would do at Pendleton, would be to keep them separate.
I figure I know the content's the same, but the structure is different enough that the patron would have possibly a preference of one over the other, especially if they're, reading with young children. So yeah, I would keep it page rather than lap edition. I mean, I get it, but I don't know. It'd be nice to have the board pages in there somewhere. Okay, so another situation where we've got the same book. I'm going to write that down because I want to change that ISBN. And take out the dashes. Okay, still 32 pages, but different publisher. So unless we knew that those publishers were affiliated with each other, we would keep them separate. Okay, here's one that needs to be combined, I believe. This one has no pagination at all. It's a pre-publication record that was never updated. So that can be fixed. One of the things when I come across that is I'll just take this ISBN and I will go out to WorldCat and I'll do a search on that ISBN to get a little bit more information since I don't have the item at hand. Okay. Has a lot of ISBNs with it. And it also has 32 pages, color illustrations, 22 centimeters. So sometimes what I do is I look at, I searched for one ISBN, but it gave me another one that might be in the other record, and that's an even greater clue that the records need to be combined. So I'll come back over here. 661, yes, that was the other ISBN that was listed on OCLC for the combined bib that they're looking at. So I can go ahead and combine these, but mainly what we're doing today is just talking points about what matches and what doesn't match. So I can go ahead and make a note to combine those later. And when I combine them, I'll put all of the ISBNs in the better record and transfer the items. So does anybody want to share any questions they've had when they've looked for records in the system and been confused about all of the different permutations and whether they should attach or just create a separate record? Anybody remember questions they've had?
If you would be willing to go back to the good night, I have a question.
Sure.
And you may have said this and I missed it, but you were talking about somebody had a version that had a lot of, that the pages were really different.
Yeah.
What ended up happening with that? Did they make a new record or?
It was Anna, and she hadn't gotten to the point of adding the record yet because it was a recent recent things she was trying to catalog. So I think she wanted to get our take on it. If there were so few libraries attached, like say we have 2 bibs in the system and only 1 library is on each, is that the right thing to do for the system? And my feeling was that we don't know what the future is going to hold, and if the pagination is that different, it should they should be on separate records for people that are going to be cataloging potentially that book in the future.
Okay.
My guess is that it was more than 10 pages. Yes, and that's what Anna's saying. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh. Well, I don't want to bore you by scrolling through the catalog, guys, but I also want to make sure that you guys are confident moving forward. Okay, here's an example where George Flies a Kite. And it's the same publisher, different years. This one has an ISBN, this one does not. But it has the same number of pages. So I think this would be another one that could be combined, and make sure that, since this one doesn't have any ISBNs at all, we might put Cove on this one. So the 1993 could have just been a reprint, and actually the copyright date was 1986. So that's another one that could be combined.
Beth, did you see Heather's question in the chat box?
Oh no, I've been minimizing that because it obscures part of my screen, so I don't see all the messages all the time. Okay. So, what was Heather's question? Oh, like a Penguin and Puffin, do you use Penguin? Yes. I think the more information we have in the record, the better. So sometimes and that was mentioned on this document over here, standards for matching. Okay, where was it? Basically, publisher affiliations can be added to the existing 264 subfield B or add a 500 note. So depending on how that record's cataloged, I would go ahead and try to make sure that both Penguin and Puffin were mentioned in the record. Because I think that just gives additional clues to somebody else who may be wondering the same thing.
And if you're looking for how to phrase that, sometimes a really good indicator of the terminology that the publisher uses is on the verso of the title page, where it oftentimes will say such and such is an imprint of, or it'll give you that. So that will help you knowing how to put that note in.
And I have to admit that I have actually done Google searches. And it kind of gives me a little bit of history, of when Puffin got started and, different acquisitions. But it will say Puffin, it was a Penguin group. So anyway, sometimes if I'm curious, I'll see if there's some kind of relationship out there on the web. And I started to make a list of these, but it's not very long yet, just so that I'd have it to refer to. And that might be something we could do as a cataloging group. is to, build a little spreadsheet with these associations so that we're not all having to do the research. That's an idea.
Well, and
anyway.
it is a lot easier too to actually look up the publisher's website where it didn't used to be.
That's true.
And on that, usually, if you dig through, you can go through and find a place for imprints, and you can track through that way as well. But it does take some time, unfortunately.
It does, and some are better than others. They'll have an imprint, sidebar or something on their main page. This one's narrowed down to Puffin, but we could get rid of that and see if this one comes up. Yeah. So under Penguin, here's all of the different publishers that are underneath them. So useful information. And like Dia said, a lot of times that'll be on the Verso page. And so if you see that relationship on there, it gives you more confidence in knowing what you can attach to what. Okay. So does that address the question? If not, feel free to ask more questions. We are at 45 minutes after the hour, so I'm thinking we'll wind up things for today. But if you come across any examples as you're cataloging that you have questions about, please email me or the mentors, and we can also also send out stuff over the Sage listserv too. All right. Thanks for everybody's participation today. I hope you have a good rest of the day.